Welcome to the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where you will learn top strategies from world-class real estate investors, both large and small. Why not? Tune in and get started today.
I think the biggest mistake a newbie can make is wanting to get someone to do the work for them and not want to compensate that other person. So you have to go in with the intention of everyone has to get paid for their efforts. And maybe you get paid less as a newbie, but the key is that you have to build those relationships where you have a place to take your deal to. And it's just simple, you either have deals or you have capital. I think that's the only way to really monetize it, other than potentially having a job in real estate where you're trading your time for money. You really have to figure out what you bring to the table. And again, deals or capital is what I break it down to.
Hey, what's up, all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where we feel investing in real estate, especially multifamily, is the best asset class out of all real estate investing. Today, we have a guest on the show. I've met him a few different times. I've looked at some of his deals, and we've actually worked together on some of the properties we used to manage that he was the broker for. So let me introduce him to all of you, and let's get the show started here. So our guest today is a real estate entrepreneur who enjoys traveling with his family, networking to find new investment opportunities, and forming new strategic relationships with accomplished real estate investors. Born in the North Shore area of Boston, he's never lived more than a few miles from the ocean. A man after my own heart. He received his BS from Salem State University with a major in business administration with a minor in marketing. He has a track record over 12 years of real estate investing experience with multiple partnerships, both rehabbing for profit, as well as holding several multifamily assets. He also owns a property management company, a construction company. He has over 8 years as a licensed real estate agent and realtor. Our guest brings a unique perspective to real estate investing by understanding all aspects of the real estate process, from acquisition through construction, asset management, and finally, the disposition of the asset. The Ortins Group is the branding company used for his entities, which include Ortins Capital Partners Group, LLC, and Ortins Property LLC, that are the holding companies for his interest in entities such as Triarchy Development LLC, a real estate development company operating in Massachusetts and Florida. And he also has holdings in various multifamily entities throughout Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, all of my real estate peeps, it is my pleasure to welcome to the show today real estate entrepreneur and the driving force behind the Ortins Group brand of entities, Mr. Brian S. Ortins. Brian, welcome to the show.
Brian, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm excited to do this interview.
It is my pleasure, and I enjoy these more than anyone else because we get experienced folks like you on the show. And I ask everyone the same questions, but everybody has a different story. So I'm excited because I know I'm going to learn something on this show as well. Any questions for us, Brian, before we roll in?
I'm ready to go.
So I understand you just had a closing. Was this a purchase that you made, or was this for a client?
No, this is a purchase that I'm making. I'm sitting in the attorney's office conference room as we're doing this interview, so trying to be very efficient.
And the ink is drying as we speak.
Yeah, so we're acquiring 2 4 units in Rhode Island. So this will be my first venture into Rhode Island.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. And this is a partnership?
So this will be, yes. So this is, we're technically flipping these 2 4 units, but we have the option to hold them as well. So yeah, we can get into any deals that you want to get into, but this just thought it was something to share, that my first time venturing out of state into Rhode Island.
So, okay, I'll follow that rabbit hole. I mean, you're in Massachusetts, you're investing
I
in
am.
the state. What were the barriers of entry to jump across a county line, or in this case, a state line? What did you have to do to prepare for this purchase?
Sure, and I'll answer this question. It's relevant to every market we're in, whether it's Florida, whether it's Central Mass, Western Massachusetts. It's the same process that I use. So I always create boots on the ground. So every market that I'm in, there's a local partner that's involved in the transaction. So in Rhode Island, I have someone who's well known and has owns multiple units and has executed multiple deals. And so when I received the deal off market through an agent, he was my first call. And then so this is our first deal together. But I mean, we've known each other for 5+ years.
So the agent, the broker agent who, this is a pocket listing, you said?
Yeah, so sorry, not to confuse it. So an agent brought me the deal off market,
Mhm.
and I took the deal to this well-known investor that is a friend of mine. And so we're doing a joint venture on this transaction. And what that allows me to do is just have someone locally every day managing the project where I live an hour and a half or 2 hours with traffic away.
Okay, so the investor you brought it to is your partner in the deal, or is the broker your partner in the deal?
The investor is the partner, but I'm also giving a few equity points to the agent as well for facilitating the deal, and I'm giving the agent the listing on the back end as well.
Nice, nice. Very creative, all the different moving parts.
Everyone gets a piece.
Hey, I'd rather have, what is it, one slice of 10 pies?
Uh, yeah, it's the saying, maybe like I'd rather have what is it, a quarter of a watermelon over one grape or something to that extent. But we're both butchering that line.
Yeah, lunch didn't come today, so we'll get there.
Yeah,
So, if it's okay to you, I'm going to start rolling out the questions
yeah,
and
it'd be great.
get started. Okay, so why real estate? Could you tell us a little bit about what you used to do, what your background was before becoming a real estate investor?
Sure. So I would say that I've been entrepreneurial my entire life, always liked business. I'll give you the short version. Was in college, decided that when I got out of college, I didn't want to work for a company. So I actually worked with my parents and a friend of mine to open up a Quiznos sub franchise, which was very popular at the time. Learned a lot about business. I would say that food is a very challenging business. It's what I call a nickel and dime business. So you have to watch the pennies. Everything was going well until the franchisor changed their model. So they sold out to a private equity group who changed the terms in terms of what our costs were. So during that time, we had the Great Recession. So this is now 2006 is when I started this. 2008, everyone knows what happened then. Now, what came out of the Great Recession is I ended up doing a condo deal with my father in 2009. So we acquired a condo for 65,000 that had sold for 217,000 in 2005. And so that was my first taste of a real estate deal. And the rest from there was not renewing my contract with Quiznos and then going in full time as a real estate agent slash investor.
So that transition, I mean, the recession was the recession. You had to do something. What was the
Mhm.
light bulb moment? What turned your focus from franchise to real estate?
It was really passionate. So I've always liked real estate. I like the concept. I like looking at it. I like designing it. I like rehabbing it. So there was always a passion for real estate. It was something that I wanted to do, but was a little skittish when the recession first hit, but then just said, hey, this is probably the best time to buy. Just foreshadowing that prices would go up. I didn't think it was something that was going to continue to drop indefinitely, and just thought it was the right time to start coming in 2012 on the uptick, which ended up, everyone knows now from 2012 to today, the run up that we had was historical. So I got the benefit of timing, I would say, was really lucky.
So always entrepreneurial,
Mhm.
had your own franchise, did well with that up until the
Terms
market,
change.
yeah, until economy changed.
Yes.
Then the real estate part of it, is this something you said you were always interested in? What types of influences did you have growing up that
Mhm.
sparked you towards real estate?
Sure. It's just something I learned from my parents. So we grew up in a multifamily. My parents owned it. They always had a rental income. I grew up in an area that was multifamily was pretty common, and I just understood the fact that living in one unit and having someone rent out the other, just the concept of having this rental income or this passive income. Again, we know that there's an active component to real estate, but we'll use the term passive. So it was just a nice way for my parents to have an additional income. And I said, well, if I could in the future scale that to have multiple units, that was always in the back of my mind from growing up. And then probably took me from that thought probably 20 years before I really executed on that.
So a 20-year overnight success.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
Yeah, you always hear these stories of people and people sit back and say, wow, they did that thing. And yeah, and it took like 10, 15, 20 years to put together all the pieces, so it made it look easy.
Mhm.
So here you are, you're living in the multi with your folks, you're growing up, you're exposed to that at a young age. What was a typical dinner table conversation with parents as landlords?
Yeah, it was very traditional upbringing in a Portuguese family. So money wasn't always the most talked about, but I would say that we would always talk about whether it was something to fix on the property. So I was very involved in the repair side of the business. So I learned a lot with just maintaining real estate, maintaining the grounds, maintain small repairs. So I learned a lot about what goes into owning the real estate. I would say that the financial part was not something we really discussed. So I never really knew the numbers. At some points, I would know what someone was paying for rent, but as I got older, I would ask more questions, but just not something that was really discussed.
So, in your family, were there other family members, uncles, aunts, anybody else who owned real estate as well?
There were some. I would say the interesting part of my parents' model, which I thought was always good, is that they would find someone they knew or referral to move in. So they never really had trouble tenants. I never knew what an eviction was growing up. It was always someone that moved in, and the average term there was probably 8 to 10 years living in the property. So it was always long-term tenants that were either family or family friends. So it was interesting. So I never really knew the that part of the business growing up, which I do know now after having owned hundreds of units. But
So, interesting, because you were brought up in an environment where this was common, this was commonplace. Some of the listeners on this show, this podcast right now, might be hearing these stories for the first time, never had exposure to real estate, and thinking, well, gee, you were born in a position where this was easy for you. But I mean, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, everybody has their own skills, everybody has their own opportunities. So you just happen to be in the right place, right time. Growing up, you had all this. After the Quiznos, what was that? What was that moment? It's like, that's it. I'm doing it. I'm going in. What was that story?
I, yeah, so at that point, when the contract was ending and we weren't renewing, I had to make a decision. It was either I had to get a corporate job or something to replace that income, or luckily I was married at the time, and I had the opportunity to take this opportunity in front of me where I was introduced. So actually, it's an interesting story. So one of my neighbors in the plaza where my restaurant was, owned a dojo, and he introduced me to who became my first broker and mentor who taught me the business. So again, relationships. So I was just part of the, we'll call it lucky, but it's really networking and telling people what you want to do. I mentioned I liked real estate. I had that intro, and I took the leap of faith and just went full time in real estate. And for 6 months, I just basically jumped in his car, rode around to his job sites, watched transactions, really just worked for free for 6 months to learn the business, and then focused on being an investor agent, where I started helping people buy multifamilies in that 2013-ish through today. I'm still an active agent as well.
So riding shotgun for 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
multifamily was the beast of choice.
And fix and flip. So he owned both. And actually, that's where I learned condo development. So to this day, we still do condo projects, and that's really where I got exposed to it. At the time, I really only thought of a multifamily as a rental property. I never thought of it as multiple units with different owners, and getting a highest and best use out of a multifamily in the North Shore is really condoing it, not renting it.
Okay, so the first deal that you pulled down, 6 months later, what did you end up purchasing?
Yeah, so I didn't purchase anything personally until about 2015. So I had that one deal I had done with my father. I had, I guess, analysis paralysis for a few years, where it was like, what do I do next? Where do I invest? And the interesting story is I didn't purchase anything in the market where I lived and learned until later. So my first purchase in 2015 was actually a condo in Lowell, Massachusetts. So there was a foreclosure. I said, I'm either going to sit on the sidelines longer, or I'm going to buy something that I think is reasonable, which was a $50,000 condo. I did all the work myself in the condo, and then sold it a little under a year later. Actually, let me take that back. About 10 months later, for 90,000. So not a home run, but it proved the concept of a fix and flip for me. And I also had the option of keeping it as a rental as well. So I always liked the idea of having a flip where I had a backstop of keeping it as a rental. Much more challenging to do that where I live, if not impossible. So that's what attracted me to Lowell, which then attracted me out to the Leominster area. And that's where I started buying multis for clients. And then I started buying out there myself as well.
Yeah, I grew up in Leominster.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
yeah, we saw, as a kid, we lived on the south side of town. We would ride the bus into town. There was nothing. You ride there now, and there's apartment complexes and strip malls and restaurants. It just boom.
Yeah.
So yeah, that interesting enough, that helped us pick our market when we were investing heavily at that time. But
Mhm.
this is your show, not my show. I'm going to put the spotlight back on you.
All
So
right.
yeah, that's it's not uncommon to find that there was real estate experience in the background, and then all the way to someone who's never had real estate experience. There's someone that sparks that in them, and then they kind of take it and run with it from there. So your first purchase was 2015, the deal with your father?
Yes. And no. So the first deal I did was in 2009. We bought a condo and kept it as a rental unit.
That was with your dad?
It was, yes. That was before I had any real estate experience. I wasn't licensed. It was just something I saw the numbers and I said, I don't know how we lose with this. We know how to renovate the unit. We don't have to deal with exterior. It's just a simple flooring, paint, fixtures. And it was walking distance to my parents' house. So it was across the street from my grandmother's house at the time. And so just convenient location. We said, hey, what's the worst that's going to happen if we buy this thing for 65,000?
Yeah, right. So you're 15 years into the game now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm going to spin the little wheel on the time machine with this
Okay.
question. And this question has two parts to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part, I'll have you ask yourself. The second part would be for a newbie or someone on the fence trying to figure out how to get started. So
Sure.
the first part of the question is going back 15 years, if you could kind of be a little bird on your shoulder, what advice would you give to yourself starting back then? And then
Mhm.
today, what advice would you give to a newbie starting out today? So let's focus on you.
Sure. It's actually the same advice. So one thing I would have done differently going back is I would have partnered with an experienced investor, brought whatever resources I had. At the time, it wasn't money, so I would have brought my time and efforts. Where I had done it for free, I probably could have negotiated to get a piece of the deals if I was more, I guess, upfront of what I was trying to accomplish. So I would say partnerships is really what I would have done early on, and it's still my business model today.
So for the newbie starting out, how does one go about starting a partnership?
Yeah, so I think the mistake that a lot of newbies do is, and I get a lot of these calls where it's like, well, what can I do for you? And I think the problem with that question is if someone doesn't know what your skill set is, I don't know how they can help you.
Yeah.
So what I always tell people to do is, well, why don't we meet? I'll tell you about what I'm doing, and then you go back and figure out, well, where can I add value? Like, what is it that you're researching or learning about that would add value? And sometimes it could just be something as simple as running around and hitting, like what I did, just hitting job sites and getting to know. But you really have to understand what your resources are. It's either time, capital, and I get requests from both. I get people that have W-2s that just want to place capital, or just someone that's new that wants to wholesale or do something. I just try to put them on a path to, if they say wholesaling, I give them a rundown of wholesaling as well as what I would buy from them and how I would go find it. So it's just really knowing what you're looking for is probably the most important thing if you're a newbie.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge for newbies because they don't know what they don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard to ask the question not even knowing where to start. So if I were to put the horse back in front of the cart,
Mm-hmm.
telling a newbie to start a partnership, and you have some great advice there. I mean, I've heard that before. Somebody asks, "Well, what can I do for you?" It's like, I have no idea. What are your skills? So, how can that newbie? I mean, yeah, great. We want him to go out and find a partner, but we want it to be beneficial for both sides, for that
Mm-hmm.
partner and for the newbie.
Mm-hmm.
Where can a newbie start to get exposure to start to understand these concepts?
I would say when I first started out, it was more in-person networking. You really had to be going to multiple events. I don't think there's really an excuse now because you can really meet people on social media and you can just tell people what you're doing and they get to kind of understand your values or how you think. And you really want to find someone. It's a tricky one because some people say you should get someone that's the opposite of you, and some people say you should get someone that's similar to you. I don't know the right answer other than you have to talk to multiple people to figure out who seems to be the right fit. That would be for the first partner. I would say as you get further down your journey, it's who shares a similar investment thesis to you. So if I'm doing a multifamily deal, does the person who's investing with me believe in the strategy, the type of asset, the location? So I would say it's just getting on the same page of what the investment thesis is.
Right, you hit something really important there too. I mean, so far, what you've told me is you've got the fix and flips, you did the condos as rentals.
Mhm.
And when was your first multifamily purchase? When,
So that was in about 2017, I would say.
okay, and that was for the intention for buy and hold?
Yeah, so this will be it was, yes. So this will be an interesting story. So my first major multifamily purchase that was not, so I had purchased multis prior, but they were essentially fix and flips or condo projects. And I kind of went to an extreme. My first multifamily purchase was actually an off-market 12 unit in Leominster. So I went straight to commercial on the first multifamily. And the story behind that was I was working with a wholesaler who got a deal. It was over our head, so we didn't have the capital, we didn't have the commercial relationships. And so simply what I did was I put the pieces together. I went back to that friend I mentioned that was a neighbor at my Quiznos, and I said, hey, would you partner on a deal? I'll have you sign on the debt and bring capital, and my capital's tied up in other deals. What if we just do a joint venture? And that's actually how I bought my first long-term hold, because at the time I wasn't willing to tie up capital in a long-term deal where I needed it for the short-term fix and flips. And so it was just really coming up with a solution where I could have just said, hey, 12 units too big for me. Maybe I wholesale it for 25K and I'm happy. But I said, do I really want to get 25K? And this is going to sound very obvious today, but it wasn't obvious at the time. I was, as anyone else, I'm always scared to overpay. So at the time I was contemplating, the seller wanted 700,000, and we said, I really can only pay 640,000. So we ended up spending 640,000 to buy a 12 unit that was renting out for about 7,000 a month. And about $100,000 later in renovation, we got the rents up to 12,000 a month. And then we sold it a few years later, right before COVID, for 1.1, which looking back at, I would have never sold it, but it was just a different mindset then of what we were trying to do with the capital. So today I look to hold these larger commercial multis, where back then I was still more transactional.
Got it. So, and again, this goes all the way back to your dinner table, which was different for you as a kid because you were exposed to these ideas. I keep hearing this theme over in your stories, creative ways to approach, you're not head on it. You can come around the joint venture way, however you're going to do it. You've got some tools in your head to make this work. So I'm going to circle this back to the newbie, right?
Mm-hmm.
You did your condo projects, you were an entrepreneur, you had a franchise, your 2017 12 unit, and all the time you're a fix and flipper as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that newbie coming out of the box, not having your experience, not having your background or exposure, is probably drinking this Kool-Aid, getting a little overwhelmed, saying, oh my God, a 12 unit is so big. Oh, a condo, how does that work? Or a fix and flip. And they might be overwhelmed at all this stuff. But you've been doing rehabs since you were probably a teenager and not even thinking twice about it because that was the normal thing to do. You do your homework, you go change a toilet. It's the same.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are, this newbie. We've just walked through 3 or 4 different, totally different industries and ways to approach real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And to layer that up, you're doing it all creatively.
Mm-hmm.
So that newbie listening to this, trying to pull the trigger, they got that arrow in the quiver, they're trying to find a target. What would you tell them? What's their strategy? I mean, they got to hit something.
Mm-hmm. So I actually see this a lot in practice. So most people that come to me as a newbie, I would say they read something about wholesaling. So I feel like that's where a lot of people are trying to get into the industry. Is it's in theory, a low cost option. And so what happens a lot of times is newbies, what I think they do well is they'll just come to me with a deal and say, Brian, how do we execute this deal? And I'll just give them the options. I'll say, well, we could probably wholesale it for this much. We can fix and flip and structure a joint venture this way. And so I just like to give them multiple options. And I want to be a resource where people bring me a deal and then we just figure out, how does everyone win in the deal? How does everyone monetize the deal? I think the biggest mistake a newbie can make is wanting to get someone to do the work for them and not want to compensate that other person. So you have to go in with the intention of everyone has to get paid for their efforts. And maybe you get paid less as a newbie, But the key is that you have to build those relationships where you have a place to take your deal to. And it's just simple, you either have deals or you have capital. I think that's the only way to really monetize it, other than potentially having a job in real estate where you're trading your time for money. You really have to figure out what you bring to the table. And again, deals or capital is what I break it down to.
So, not to get cute here, but it sounds like wholesaling would be the gateway drug to get you hooked on real estate, right?
Yeah.
Is and I've heard different podcasts where there's wholesale people who just build this machine, and that's their thing. And great. I mean, I don't want to call it a gateway drug if that is your passion and you want to do that. But I see so many people eventually in my world get to the buy and hold, and that is the end game for a lot of these people. So you mentioned something else, the assets that you have personally. You mentioned your time, your capital, and I think the third quadrant on that is experience. So your newbie who's going to maybe start wholesaling, they're going to put in their time. They may not have the money or the experience, so their time is the most valuable thing they're going to put in. Eventually, doing a few deals, they'll get the experience. If they stick with it or take that and fund a wholesale, they'll start to build up their war chest so they can get capital. So at the same time, they have to burn their time, they're getting their experience and slowly building up their war chest, where eventually they'll have all three. Partnerships, you mentioned something interesting there. It doesn't necessarily have to be the opposite of you or maybe the duplicate of you, but what usually happens, and it's always different because people are creative, it's some mix of time, capital, and experience coming together to solve that whole problem. So here we are with the newbies. And again, wholesale could be their end game, but it's typically something to get their feet wet to the next deal, the next level, the next level. What would you say if you had to put percentages on it now? If you're investing in buy and hold, wholesaling, maybe you're not even doing anymore, fix and flips, like what's your business model today? And I'm not putting this out there for anyone to look at it and say, oh, I got to do what Brian's doing.
Yeah.
This is what works for you. Where are you today?
Yeah. And I would say it's ever evolving. For me, I've always taken the stance of opportunity. So, and actually our syndication company, which I'll get into in a minute, is Port Unity, which is basically the word opportunity without the first O and the P. So we strongly believe, whether it's myself or anyone I partner with, that we just have to take what's in front of us. And so to answer that today, I would say a lot of people are bringing me these off-market fix and flips. And so I would say between fix and flip and wholesaling, it's really a good balance of, I'll call that active income. So wholesaling, fix and flip, being a real estate agent, and long-term passive income with real estate syndication. And now I'll say that that's still active for us because we're leading the charge, but I would say it's a good 50-50 balance. So my week is spent, like this week I have 2 closings on the fix and flip side. We're actively raising capital on a 64-unit multifamily. So I wouldn't say, I'd say overall blended, it's 50-50. Obviously some weeks may be different, but I like to keep that balance of active capital and long-term wealth.
So 50-50 is your, to put a label on it, your day-to-day involvement?
It's how I split my time. A lot of what I do is acquisitions and networking, putting the pieces together, right? So if we have a joint venture, I'm getting I'm networking with the person to set up the project, then I'm checking in with them. So a lot of my business structure is having an admin in the office who helps me just track. So as today, as I was driving to the closing, we're talking through our checklist of what we need to do. So that's on the active side. And at the same time, I'll be on multiple investor calls in the afternoon and evening of people looking to invest in our other deal. So again, I say 50-50, it's pretty close. It may swing 60-40, but I would say I intentionally want it to be 50-50 because my goal is to produce more capital and short-term investments to park it in long-term buy and holds.
Huh. So it's fix and flip on a higher level.
Yeah, so one fix and flip we're acquiring this week is a 21 unit in Springfield. So fix and flip to me means multiple things. There's going to be a fix and flip model with that 21 unit where I could sell it to another investor, or I can simply get a group of investors, buy it at the appraised value, and make some capital for my fix and flip business, and still have some ownership in the next phase of it.
So I'm gonna just keep going on this because I have questions. I want to kind of see where it goes. So half your day is acquisitions for these, I'll say, smaller apartment buildings to do a fix and flip to take the capital.
Or condos.
Whatever this box of chocolates is, you want to reap the profits from there to go into the syndications for the bigger deals.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So your time may be split 50-50. What I'm drilling for is the Pareto principle, because somewhere down there is
Yes.
that 80-20.
Yes.
80-20.
80 towards the syndications and 20 towards the active.
Maybe, right? So I guess the question I would ask for your holdings on your smaller acquisitions, I'll call those the fix and flips, and your holdings for your larger acquisitions, which I'll call those your syndications. I'm guessing just because of the raw numbers, the syndication is the larger number of assets.
Yes.
Okay.
But not to get too in the weeds, but again, in a syndication, as you know, there are multiple owners, right? So technically, I have more assets in the short-term stuff because it's myself, maybe a joint venture.
Huh. So your ownership is higher on the smaller deals, and then the larger deals. Huh.
There are multiple partners, and I can get into structure and how that works with an SEC regulated syndication and being a general partner limited. So yeah, we can get into whatever you want to get into on that as well.
CD and reggae, right? I call it reggae. It's supposed to be reg A, but reggae.
Right, yeah.
It's island. I'm barefoot right now. Okay.
That's great.
All right, so that's really interesting. So you've defended your position there. Asset-wise, you may really be closer to the 50-50 and not hitting the Pareto principle at all.
And it fluctuates, but generally I would say 50-50.
That's very interesting, right? Because you bring up a good point. Your GP, which is your general partner on your syndications, are you coming into some of your syndications as limited partners on some of them?
Yes.
Okay, so
everyone structures it differently. So the way that we've structured it is we look at the general partnership as our compensation for executing the business plan. So in a limited partner, there's no responsibilities, right? So you're a silent partner with no voting rights, which is what makes it a syndication and why it's regulated. Whereas in a joint venture, everyone has an active role in the deal. And so for us, we're always the general partner, but the partners also invest their personal capital as limited partners. And not to get too in the weeds on the structure, but we do what's called a 70-30. And so we're giving 70% to the limited partners. We are retaining 30% for executing and the business plan could be as short as 5 years to as long as 10 years. So we're working on it to make sure that the investors are achieving their returns and distributions, and that's how you get compensated in syndication. There are a few other fees as well, but that's generally the split that we've done is 70-30 in favor of the LPs.
That's a pretty standard number. And then it all depends on the deal too, right?
Yes.
All right, so you did a good job getting me through that. So we talked about the advice you'd give yourself, the same to do the newbie. We talked about your asset split, where you're spending your time today, and you never know if the market changes, your strategy might change.
We would shift, yeah, if there was another opportunity that came up. I mean, what we're again, I don't want, I guess, hoping for is one way to describe it. But if prices really came down on the commercial side, then I would just shift all the focus. So what I do a lot of, again, going back to that principle, or what I consider the two things in real estate that I focus on, which is deals and capital. Most of my time is focused on networking to raise capital. So in some markets you have more capital than deals, and sometimes you have the reverse, right? So that's kind of just determining what you need and then putting all your attention and going after what you need. So right now we have an influx of deals. We're starting to see some value in the markets that we invest in. So we're really focused on gaining more connections or introductions to other capital. We're starting to look at institutional capital, which before it's always been friends and family, referrals. Now we're looking at going after larger institutions that are what they call capital markets.
Sure.
We haven't done anything with them yet, but that's the only way we can see us scaling. And there's always a give and take. So generally the terms may be not in your favor with institutions, but maybe it gets you to your goal of how much money you want to have in assets under management. So going back to what we said earlier, Brian, it's what do you prefer? Do you want more equity in less units, or do you want less equity in more doors? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I want the larger door count. So we're targeting to acquire at least 300 doors this year. We're already under contract or have closed on 200 of them. And so I think we'll get there this year. But we want to be at 100 million in assets under management by 2029. And so we'll be somewhere around the 30 million mark. So I think we'll get there.
Interesting. So now you've opened up another door, and I'm going to follow the rabbit down that hole. I love the show, right? It's always different, right?
It's great. Yeah.
So deals and capital.
Mm-hmm.
Would you get to a point, okay, like deals are interesting because I hear all the time, and I'm sure you hear all the time, oh, I can't find any deals. There's no good deals out there. There's no good deals. You've built a pipeline of relationships where you have deal flow.
Correct.
You have deals.
Yes.
Okay. Because you have deals, it's easier to find capital.
In theory, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard conversation to go to an investor and say, someday I'm going to have a deal. Would you like
you're
to?
correct. Yes. Having something to present is a lot easier to raise the capital versus just on a theory. Yes.
Right. I mean, Brian Burke was on the show and he says, build up your track record, build up your credibility kit. I mean, even if you don't have a deal today, you did those condos, you did the fix and flip, you did the 12 unit. That's something you could put on a piece of paper or a spreadsheet and show someone, say, look, we do this. We're real. Yeah. We have a track record. Mm-hmm. That will attract the money as well. So agreed. I guess what I'm getting at, do you have an overflow of deals that you can't fund right now?
The short answer is yes. And I'll preface by saying the tricky part for us now raising capital is that the deals are very close together. So what we've learned is it's very hard to raise for multiple deals at a time. So you really have to raise for one, close out the round, and start raising for the next one. And so when they're very close together, a lot of times you exhaust your investors that have liquid capital ready to invest. So I would say too many deals makes capital raising challenging. So that's why we actually bring on what's called a co-GP. So again, not to get too into the weeds on the SEC rules, but you can bring in a co-general partner on a deal or multiple, but they have to have an active role. You
Sure.
can't bring someone on just to cap raise.
Yep.
And so that's how we've been able to raise for multiple deals at a time, is bringing on these co-general partners who have, again, to your point, have a track record, have investors. They bring a role to the table. They're good in asset management. They could be good in investor relations, but they will bring a skill set in addition to the capital.
So you know your buy box, you know what you're going for. You've got the A side where you're owning more of the equity, the B side where it's a bigger deal, you're a GP at 30%. You've got deals coming in. So let me throw this out there. Why not just form more JV partnerships?
So we do. It really, the JV is based on how much capital the investor has. So another thing I didn't mention on this as well is we do have other entities that are JVs. So in your neck of the woods, in one of my JV entities, we own a 7-unit in Athol and a 6-unit in Fitchburg. And that was just simply that same partner. Again, this is all relationships. The same investor that I knew from Quiznos that was a neighbor there. He's the lead investor. He's also the one that did the 12-unit with me. And so we've always been joint venture partners, and we just continue doing deals together. So going back to the newbie piece, you really want to form those relationships with someone that has what you don't have. So when I needed capital, he had capital, and that relationship's continued now for I don't know, not a decade, but approaching a decade.
Sure.
And we just continue doing deals. And now things changed. So at some point we sold, we're back in, and now we're all with the same mindset that we just want to acquire assets. And they have to have a value add component. So when you hear the word value add, to me, it's really just taking my fix and flip business, executing that on a multifamily where I'm buying it for a low amount, creating the value, whether it's fixing the units or increasing the rents or both, and then holding the asset once we're done versus just selling it for profit. And I can get into why we do that in terms of tax benefits and versus just capital gains on a fix and flip. But again, going back to the 50-50, I like to balance the tax advantages with the active income of fix and flip.
Nice, very smart. Opportunity seems to be the
theme.
that's definitely the umbrella on this
Yeah.
whole recording. I did see the thumb go up. Hey, the thumb went up. That was cool. So I'm going to throw this out there. If you end up with too many deals, I'm a buyer.
Understood.
Okay, yeah. If you got something that maybe doesn't fit your wheelhouse, I would definitely look at it because in my world, I have investors, but I'm kind of stuck on a desert island here, so I'm not in the networking realm that you're in. But I mean, the other night for dinner, it was an unanticipated thing that happened when we moved down here. It's like, yeah, great, we'll go live on an island. We did not anticipate that our neighbors would all be multimillionaires.
That's great.
So, I mean, we have some nice dinner conversations with other business owners and stuff like that, and they know I've run the podcast up here. But yeah, there's interest, but I don't have the deal flow or the connections to the network you have.
We'll discuss opportunity offline.
Opportunity. All right, great. We could definitely do that. Or if you want to just put me in your
Yes.
deal flow email box, I would be happy there as well. Yeah. Hey, and either you never know. It's maybe you come in on the deal or just wholesale it off and take a slice of pie and put it into one of your other ventures.
Sounds great.
Opportunity, right?
Win-win.
Yeah, win-win-win-win.
Yes.
All right, so I'm on about my 4th page of notes here, and I'm
Is
going
that good, or is that enough? Is that a lot of value, hopefully?
Well, yeah, because it helps me keep track of the conversation, and it helps me take those breadcrumbs so I can dig my way back out of the rabbit hole.
Okay,
Yeah, and I'm having fun, so I hope you are as well.
good.
Um, so the next part of our segment here, we're going to talk about a deal. So I will ask you, what was the best deal you've ever done? What type of property was it? How did you find it? And how did you finance it?
Sure. So I could go a couple different directions here. I could go on the larger deals that I've done, but I'm going to go back to that 12 unit that I did. And so what I will say to it was that that was my first foray into multifamily. We took the plunge, went with a commercial building, and really what that did for me was it really opened my eyes to the benefits of multifamily. And when I say multifamily, really that 5+ unit world where you're really running a business more than you're running a small multifamily. Um, and so it really changed the course of my investing career. If I hadn't done that 12 unit, we could be having a different conversation today where maybe I did not get into syndications. Maybe I just focused on fix and flip full time. But that building really changed the course of everything that I've done since then, where now there's more of a focus on cash flow, where before it was how much can I quickly make on this fix and flip. So
So,
that was career changing is how I would describe that deal. And to talk about how we found it, so that was with a wholesaler I was working with. I went on the appointment. The idea was we were going to wholesale it. I liked the deal, and I said, well, what if I just want to buy it? Can I just pay you a wholesale fee instead of me splitting the wholesale fee? I'll bring in a partner and I'll just keep the deal. And that's how that deal came about. And then financing it, it was my first time getting, so all of my financing to that point had either been doing a cash deal with my father or it had been hard money loans to do the fix and flips. And so this was my first time getting commercial bank debt. And that was just going to a local bank and saying, hey, I'm buying this 12 unit. That was my first experience where they didn't ask me, what is it going to be worth? What's your renovation? They asked me, how much money does the building make? What are the rents? What are the expenses? So it opened me up to a whole nother way to underwrite deals as well.
yes, when you do cross that line into commercial, it's not so much based on your W-2 anymore. It's the asset that you're bringing to the table. That's definitely a factor. I mean, experience doing this, they may want you to have some more skin in the game if you don't have the experience, but they're looking at the asset and how does the asset perform. So 12 unit multifamily, wholesaler sourced you the deal, you scooped it from him. Finance was
Mhm.
commercial loan debt, so this was, you went to a
Lowell
bank, a
5.
credit union?
Yeah. Just Lowell 5, which is a
Loan
small
fund.
local bank. That was on the outskirts of their area, but that was again relationships. I was introduced to the bank and I was able to ask them to expand their area for me to get this deal.
That would have been my next question. How did you get Lowell 5 to come down into
Mhm.
Leominster?
And I brought them a lot of other investors as an agent as well. So it wasn't just this one deal. We brought them into the market with other investors as well.
So you had the track record with them. They knew who you were, and you
Mhm.
were a safer bet. Not that I don't want to
Yes.
use the word bet because this isn't speculation.
Yeah.
It goes back to that credibility box. You had like, hey, we've done this, we've done this. I brought you this person, this person. They say, okay, we know who you are. We know you're going to perform. You do what you say you're going to do, and okay, we'll go down on that 12 for you. All right,
Yes.
so give me the numbers on that one. Your purchase was, I think,
640,000.
640.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you talked them down from what, seven?
I think it was seven. Yeah, I'm trying to remember back. It was around 700. I mean, let's just call it high sixes, low sevens. It's
Okay.
roughly about 700.
All right, here we go. It's
And
calculating
so,
time.
yeah,
So,
and so we the rents were 7,000 a month.
okay, I'm gonna go back to the purchase price for just a second here. Commercial loan,
Sure.
what do you have to put down on that?
That was a 20% down.
All right. 128-ish.
Yeah. Yep.
Should we call it like 140 just to cover the closing costs and
It
inspection?
would have been, yeah, it would have been somewhere around 140.
All right, so you got a mortgage of 500.
Mm-hmm.
Your rent's a 7K a month. How long were they at 7K before you raised the rents?
Yeah, so I'd say over the first year, we spent 100,000 on the building. There was, with the 7,000, there was a few units vacant. A few people moved out when we came in, just with a new owner. So we did some exterior work. So we did roof, we did some windows, we did some unit turns. We did some plumbing, electrical. So we came in within the first year, we spent 100,000. We turned 5 of the 12 units in year one. And then with the first round of rent increases, we ended the year one at about 9,200 in rent a
Okay.
month. This is gross rent.
All right, here we go. I love when the pieces come together here. Okay, so you went from 84K gross rents. Is that correct? Let me hit that again. To 110.
Mm-hmm. And then over the next few years, where we sold in 2020, we had the rents up to 11,800 a month.
Very nice.
And today they would be 20,000 a month.
We can't get greedy there. That's okay though. So when you disposed of it, was that 11.8 a month?
Yes, yeah.
Very nice. Okay, here's the fun part now. Your rehab at 100K, was that out of pocket? How did you finance that?
Yeah, there was no rehab budget with Lowell 5. It was all out of either cash flow or reserves that we had set aside at the purchase.
Okay, so your all-in was 228. Your mortgage was 500, giving you an evaluation of 720. That's just the value. What did it actually appraise for after that first year when you hit 84K?
So we didn't have it appraised at that time. So we had it at purchase where we bought it for 640.
Yeah.
The appraisal came in somewhere around like 780.
Okay, so even if we stayed there, which it wouldn't have because you raised the rents, modestly 60 to 100K in equity.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get to the disposition. So year one, you bring it up to 84K gross rents.
Mm-hmm.
What was the time frame to get to 92 or 9,200?
That was probably about, I don't know, 14 months, let's call it. So I'd say instead of 12-month cycles, I'd say they're probably about 14-month cycles between having leases renew or turnover.
Okay. And then when did you dispose of the property? How many months in?
So let's see here. That would have been 3 years later. So let's just call it 36 months.
And that's where you exited at 11.8,
Yes.
11,800
Yes.
in rents. Okay. So just looking at your valuation there, I'm guessing it would have been 1.2 million that you sold it for?
We sold at 1.1. So this is like right before COVID. We hadn't had that surge yet. So if I had waited a little bit, we would have had a bigger surge. But the 1.1 was roughly what we were getting. So we had put it out to the market and we were getting offers in that range. We probably could have held out and tried to get 1.2. which is what I think the value was at the time, about 100 a door.
You still did okay.
Hmm.
And you were the broker on the deal when you sold it?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Mhm.
Okay, so you pay yourself back the 228 for your rehab and your down payment. You pay off the mortgage. You put 370 in your pocket. $125,000 a year in equity.
Yeah, I think we each walked away with a check. I remember the check number was 180,000 each.
Huh.
Yeah. And then just for the deal structure, as I mentioned, at the time, I didn't have the capital. So I put in 10K into the deal so my 10K effectively became 180K. But I also did put in the sweat equity into the deal and the management of the deal.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you got paid for the management.
I did.
Yeah, I'm just leaving all the other
Yeah.
buffet items off the
Mhm.
table. I'm just looking at why would you not do real estate?
Yeah.
You pull down this deal, you did it creatively, you put 10K into the deal, which
Mhm.
what did you have, like 1,000% return on investment, something like that?
1,800.
Yeah, sick, right? 180%. Wow. Yeah. So how many people were in the deal?
Just two of us. Just that gentleman I keep mentioning that's been doing deals with me. That was the neighbor that I met who introduced me to the broker that got me into investing.
So I came out at 370, it was 360 because you both got 180.
Hmm.
Not bad.
Hmm. I was happy with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was, see, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, that was including, I don't know, actually, sorry, was that post? I can't remember now if that was post reimbursements, but yeah, no, I think that was the total.
Yeah, this was after everything was paid off. This was after
Yeah,
reimbursement.
correct. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
This is when everything was net
Yes,
done.
yes, yep.
Got all your money back plus.
Plus the 180, yes, yeah. Mhm.
Huh. So even at 60 grand a year, I'm sure you had other things going on.
I did, yeah, still doing the fix and flips. Interesting enough, I didn't really do any more of these until, so I hadn't done a commercial deal again. Now I've done up to 6 units I had been doing after this building, but until I got over that 6 unit mark again, wasn't until, I don't know, 2022. So it just, you would have thought that I would have looked for more of those, but again, just being too focused on the smaller stuff, I think I could have been buying more larger assets, which hindsight's 2020, but would have been the better thing to be doing at the time, would be buying these 12 plus unit buildings.
Yeah, I mean, for me, these are bread and butter deals all day long. And these are an interesting niche because they feel too big for that investor who wants to stay four doors and under to not go commercial,
Mhm.
but they don't feel big enough for that investor who would like to start at 30, 40, 50 units, a good sizable deal.
Yeah, it's a
So,
sweet spot for sure.
yeah, it is a sweet spot. And, if these are too small for you, I know a guy who lives up without shoes who would take these.
I'll still buy a 12 unit.
Who wouldn't, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you and I know these numbers, this would work.
Yeah.
So the deal was profitable. You didn't lose money. We didn't go into the tax savings. We didn't go into what you paid yourself for property management.
Yeah.
We didn't go into any of the other profit centers. I mean, if there was coin op laundry on that, you were
It
probably,
was.
yeah,
Hmm.
another 1,000, another 15,000-ish.
Hmm.
So, there's all of that too that we weren't even putting onto this plate. We're just looking at the raw numbers. What did it cost to get in? What did you get out? And why would you not do this deal?
Yeah, the one mistake, and I don't know if that was one of the questions, but the one mistake that I did on that deal was I've always subscribed to the thought, just whatever the investor that's bringing in the majority capital wants to do. I think at that time, what we should have done was just refinance the asset, hold whatever cash we wanted back out of it, and we would still own that asset today and would have refied it probably 2 or 3 times now. Without exaggerating, probably could get to a $2 million valuation on that asset.
Yeah, absolutely could have. We played that game with a 6 unit. We bought it, rehabbed it, stabilized it in 3 months, cashed out within the first year. I think we got paid $60,000-$70,000 in our pocket to actually purchase the property. Refinanced it twice after that, got another 200 out of it, and eventually sold it for almost $1 million. So off a 6 unit.
I get it. Yeah, we have a similar deal to that in Haverhill as well. So which we did do the refi. We still own that asset today.
Yeah. It was time for us to dump some of our holdings. We pushed them as far as we could go for the rehabs. There was nothing more I needed to do to them. So about 3 years ago, we set sail on a lot of our assets, and we moved down here thinking, don't know what the next chapter is going to look like. We've settled in. I've spoken to enough coconuts, calling them Wilson, where I'm itching to get out there again and start doing more of this stuff. But my life balance is in a different place now. So
yeah, that's important.
Much happier. I'm at a much happier operating position now. So I'm okay with all that. But again, this isn't my show. It's yours.
Right. It's still interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear these stories. I mean, that was a very nice deal that you pulled down there. Is there another deal that you want to?
No, I would just say that right now, what the deals that we're doing, I get very excited about. We're taking down 40+ unit buildings in Western Massachusetts in the Springfield area. So that's what we're syndicating. So again, I'm very passionate about the syndication model, but I keep going back to this one deal because it really gave me the confidence to get into syndication. I already knew the business plan, and I just multiplied it by however many units. And so that's why whenever someone asks me about my favorite deal or any deal, I always refer to that 12 unit. And it's just, that's the one deal that's always going to be the deal for me.
Yeah, I think you called it the eye opener.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So what is the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome as a real estate investor, and how did you solve it?
Yeah, it's going to go back to, and I don't know if this is going to come off wrong, but I've never had a deal issue. And I think a lot of that has been because of just having wholesale contacts, agent contacts. I mean, today when we get off this call, I'll probably have a few messages of off-market deals to look at. For me, it's always been a capital constraint. So no matter how much I grow, I can never take everything down myself. So partnerships have always been the biggest thing for my business. And again, I know there's different concepts out there, like the small and mighty investor that is really just buying the smaller assets. I subscribe that I want to have a larger portfolio so that at some point I can be more passive in the future as we build out this business that will manage these assets. And so I have a plan similar to your plan where we're looking to move to Naples, Florida in the next 5 years. So I'll have to have a similar business model to yours where I'll have to do some of this stuff remotely.
Yeah, COVID forced us to figure that out. We had to run the business without going into the office. And then when they let up a little bit, it's like, why are we going back to the office? So you can invest where it makes sense and live where you want to live.
Yes.
Yeah. So the capital seemed to be the hurdle, but you've got the deal flow, which I'm biased here. I always believe that the deal flow, you'll find the capital. So you've got
You
that.
do. It's not that simple. So a lot of times, especially with today's challenging market, is it's not so much the deal, it's more the deal environment. So if people are fearful with what they hear on the news, that affects their, it's easy to say you should buy low and sell high, but when you're in an environment where you have to buy low, but the news says that the world's going to end, it's difficult to make that investment. So that's probably the biggest challenge with capital raising is working in the environment that you're in. And then when there's plenty of capital, in another example was a couple of years ago, the challenge was, well, the returns are too low for my capital because it's a competitive market. So you always have challenges around capital. So the deal is part of it, but it's people have a lot of options of where to place their capital, and they just want to find what works for them. So we just want to present them with our business thesis, and this is where you can diversify. I never tell anyone to put all their eggs in one basket when it comes to syndication. So we have one business model, but you can go invest with someone in Texas or Florida or somewhere else that we don't have assets. So we're just one avenue for people looking to invest. But it's relationships. So when you raise capital for a deal like this, it's not just sending someone an email and they send you money. There's conversations, there's questions, there's webinars. So it's very much a relationship business, whereas in fix and flip, it's just numbers. Okay, you're doing this, it's a short-term deal, I'm okay giving you money. When it's a long-term deal, well, there are a lot more questions because we're in business together for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. So I'll throw this out there. You've got the deal flow. Maureen Miles put this thought in my head, and it just made so much sense to me. She said, Brian, you could have your joint venture. My name is Brian too, right?
Yep.
You could have your joint venture with this person, and you could go together and pull down that deal. But there's no reason you can't come over to this person and do a joint venture with that person, pull down that deal.
Yes.
And you can like joint venture with whoever brings the deals or has one of those three components, the time, capital, or the experience. What do you bring to the table? So I'll mirror that right back to you, Brian. I mean, if you've got the deal flow, maybe, I mean, you're looking for the opportunities, you see opportunities, you're creative in doing that. I know that you have your brand of boxes of chocolate, but what if you just came outside of the box and as your own entity did a JV with somebody else? Because in
No,
my
and I do that. So to answer that question, where I think the JVs make the most sense is in that world that we just discussed, that 12 to 39 units is where I could see us doing a joint venture together. When you start getting into that 40 plus, unless someone's willing to really tie up significant amounts of capital, it tends to be more of a syndication, or there are more pieces involved in the deal. So I think what we could do is explore, and again, I have this 21 unit. I just have an accepted LOI. I'm touring a 33 unit on Friday. So I didn't even mention that property, but that's another accepted LOI. Those deals make more sense for JVs.
Yeah. So in the conversations I've had over the past year, getting myself back out there, I mean, it's been nice. I have a nice tan and I've lost 115 pounds and I'm happy with what's going on, but I'm getting the itch, right? So it's one of two flavors of ice cream today. I'm either going to source and pull down my own deals, or I'm going to partner with people who know what the heck they're doing. And that's it. That's the day.
So I'll throw something back at you where something for the listeners to think about is, where do you fit in that model? So I could see you being a good JV partner because you have that track record. You can add value as an active partner, where someone who doesn't have that probably makes more sense to go in as a limited partner and not have that involvement. So that's another thing to consider as well when someone's investing in real estate.
Sure. And to the level of how many airports do I want to travel through every year, which it's been a life change, and now that's part of it, right? So if I get to jump on a plane to Texas or Florida or Georgia or Massachusetts or Los Angeles or wherever the deal is, that's where the deal is. I have to go there and look at the bricks, and I love that part of it too. I mean, I drive my wife crazy because I can't walk into a building and not be looking at fire code and setbacks and this and that, and where's the breaker boxes? Are they within 5 feet of the doors? All this stuff that, your normal person trying to figure out what they want for dinner. I'm looking at the placement of the sprinklers in the ceiling, right? It's like, I cannot unsee this anymore. So, yeah, and it is what it is. I'm going to build this motor. I'm going to keep running the motor. So I'm either going to drive the bus or I'm going to take a seat. That's it. All right, man, I got to stop talking about me. This is not, it ain't how this show's supposed to work. Okay, so you're doing really well. I want to thank you for your time, but let's keep it rolling.
No, thank you.
It's my pleasure because I'm learning so much as well. So everybody has that first book that made the biggest impact on them as a real estate investor. Was there a book for you that had the biggest impact on you?
Yes. So the usual book is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but that actually, interestingly enough, is not my journey. Mine was actually The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller.
Yes.
And that's the one that made me think differently about real estate. Again, just to go back to that, I didn't execute on that, but that's the first book that I read that opened me up to that concept.
Yes, that was the Blue Book. Yes. That was recommended to me by, not Peter, his son, Sean Bernard, who now lives, I believe, in Maui, and he's a farmer, and I forgot the name of his company. But, we crossed paths, and we're actually related through my sister and all that.
Interesting.
He called me out on that. He says, Brian, you've got to get this book. I says, well, why? He says, as I was reading it, this book is you. This is what you've done. He says, okay, I'll get the book. And I read the book, and yeah, I was like, I've done that. This is good. And it was, when you read a book like that, it's good to see that someone confirms your crazy ideas. It's like you sit at the dinner table with folks who don't do real estate, and they look at you like, what planet did you land from? Because you're talking about foreign stuff that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But to read the stories and say, yeah, I've been on this road, and your book, right? You called it out. So what was it about that book for you by Mr. Keller, Gary Keller? What was it about that book?
I don't know. I guess to me, it was opening up the concept of it being a business, like where, as I mentioned, the word that I keep using is transactional. I've always been very transactional. That book made it a business. And again, I didn't execute it right away. It took years, but it opened up that concept of doing it as a business and not as a transaction.
Yes, all day long. I'm an operations nut. Is there a second book that had an influence on you as an investor?
There's been a bunch, but I would say the E-Myth was a big one. And again, the theme is that I read it, didn't execute it for years, but it's always in the back of my mind. And to be honest, on both those books, it wasn't until I reread them, I don't know, five plus years later, that they really stuck. So I guess my advice would be, when you have a book that has a compelling story or information, is to reread the book sooner.
Yes. E-Myth is Michael Gerber.
Yes.
Two very good recommendations. Michael Gerber, All About Pies.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that book for me, I've got it over there on the CDs.
Yeah.
And I think my most played CD in Chevy Silverado University would have been CD number 6, where he starts boiling down the flow chart and taking the names out and putting the operation in it. I mean, I'm probably glowing a little bit here because You know, there's these points in your life where you're trying to figure stuff out and solve things, and there's one cloud coming this way and one cloud coming this way, and they're totally different thoughts. And then all of a sudden, something happens where they fit like puzzle pieces in your head, and you see it as a whole piece for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And, the E-Myth just helped to see the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually in July. I don't know exactly where it is. I think it's Candor Realty. I've been invited to come up and do a presentation in New Hampshire. So I'm really looking
I have to
forward.
come see you. John's a good friend of mine.
He recommended that I reach out to you to have you on the show.
Oh, great. Okay.
He was on the show too, talking about pulling down the portfolios, and yeah, that was a really great show for him.
I will be at that event. Do you know, we'll talk offline, but I'm gone 4th of July weekend, but I'm assuming it's not that week.
I'm leaving the island July 24th.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so I'm coming back August 1st.
Perfect.
So yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think you're a lot taller than me, so it'll be kind of easy to verify that. Because right now, this angle on you makes you look like you're really, really tall. All right, so got a couple more questions for you.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think you've already spelled this out, but I'll just ask, what's next for you in real estate, and why not get started today?
Yeah, so again, going back to I have the exposure to the apartment syndications and large commercial real estate. So that's 100% the focus today, is just continuing to scale that business model with syndications, having conversations like we've had, whether it's joint ventures, whether it's syndication, but it's really acquiring more assets is the focus. And I say everyone should start today. And if you're not doing it, to reach out to people who are, and just finding the people that you want to align yourself with and that want to align with you to help you get to that goal.
You brought a thought to my mind. I think it's Jim Collins, Good to Great.
Yes, the red book.
Yeah, he's got a couple of them back there.
Okay. Yeah.
So, the question was, why not get started today? You're not getting started today. You already have this thing moving, right? So
Yes.
you're probably familiar with the hedgehog and the flywheel.
I am not.
Okay, in his books, he talks about the hedgehog. The fox always tries to get the hedgehog, right? But that hedgehog does that one thing better than anybody else. He just rolls up into the ball, and the fox can try 100 different ways to penetrate the hedgehog, never gets the hedgehog. Hedgehog sees the fox coming, says, okay, I'll roll up into a ball again, because that's that one thing he does better than else.
All right.
Multifamily syndications, there you are, right?
Okay.
And then the flywheel, the momentum it takes to start, such inertia to get that wheel to even start, and then it's moving a little bit and it's easier, and then it's moving faster and it's very easy, till eventually you're just tapping the wheel and it's spinning along, humming around, right? So
That
you're
makes sense.
already there. You're already there. So
We got to continue that momentum.
yes, and it just at your level, at your stage, you've already got the deal flow, you've already got the momentum, the flywheel's spinning. You just have to give it that occasional tap to keep it moving along. So
Yeah.
hats off to you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the last question I ask is not on the list, and I always throw this as a curveball, because
Yeah.
this is where I usually get some really juicy details.
All right.
Brian, what's the question on the show today that I should have asked you and I didn't ask you?
I would say what I like that you asked was regarding what a newbie should do. So I'm trying to think of what you didn't ask that you should have, but I think that's a tough one. Let me think for a sec. Maybe diving into more detail on the off-market acquisition of real estate. It's probably a good follow-up for people listening to this that heard me acquire that 12 unit for a great price. It was all because it was off-market. So that's the theme that someone should walk away from here. And if they're not doing off-market deals, is figuring out how to get involved in off-market deals and buying at a discount.
So if I were to ask you the question at a 30,000 foot level, how does someone even penetrate or get into that market to get that deal flow?
Sure. Easiest way without time or capital is to go to real estate agents and to wholesalers who have off-market listings or know of people that are selling. That's just more the relationship game. And then the other option is to take a course or go online for free and learn how to wholesale and spend some money either mailing postcards or calling and just researching, sourcing off-market real estate, and you'll find more content than you can digest.
I'm glad you asked that question.
I think it's the most relevant to that deal that I did.
So on that deal, was it the networking events that built that relationship?
Yep, so I met that wholesaler at a live networking event. We had been talking for 6 months on like what we were doing in real estate, and we just decided to start working together. So he was good at sourcing the deals. So he was cold calling postcards, but he had a full-time job where I had the time as an agent and I was already driving around. I would go on all the appointments. And then if it was a deal, we would decide, are we going to fix and flip it together? Are we going to wholesale it? And then, as I mentioned, I decided to keep that deal. And then I kept some other ones along the way as well.
Very, very good stuff. I'm glad that, glad we were able to put a spotlight back on that, because there's always gold in that empty box of question that you don't know, right?
Yeah, and I'm happy to connect with anyone listening that wants to dive into anything further. I'm always a resource in the marketplace.
What a great segue for our last question. Should our viewers and listeners want to get in touch with you today, Mr. Ortins, how should they reach out to you?
So I'm on all the major platforms with everything is under the Ortins Group. So the easiest way to get a hold of me quickly is email. So it's my full name, Brian Ortins @ortinsgroup.com. And you can message me on Facebook. You can, the OG Mind on Instagram. So everything is based around the Ortins Group, and you'll get to see what I'm up to. And I'd love to connect with everyone that hears this.
Excellent. I cannot thank you enough for your time today. Congratulations on your closing. A new market.
Yes.
Jumping state lines. I'm sure that's exciting.
Thank you, Brian, for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I love doing this. I learned something today, so I really value you coming on. So thank you for that.
And I made a note about joint ventures with you, so I'll be in touch.
Yes. Like I said, I either have to pull down the deals or jump on the bus with someone who knows how to drive. So
I'm excited.
Yeah,
Thank you so much,
too.
Brian.
Yeah, so that's our show today. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Mr. Brian Ortins. Any last words?
No, just look forward to hearing from everyone who got value and potentially wants to learn or do a deal together.
Excellent. Thank you again, Brian, of the Ortins Group, and we will get you posted all over that and in the show notes as well. Ladies and gentlemen, my real estate peeps, this is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.